Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Tamisha Price Brock, owner and CEO of Prodigious Music Concepts, LLC, and I would like to welcome you to my brief webinar entitled QEP, Improving Academic Writing for Music Majors. While this webinar is geared towards music majors, the things you will hear today can generalize to just about any college or university student studying any major on any university campus. I'm pleased today to be joined by Professor Latorial Faison, English professor, and an accomplished poet at Virginia State University. Welcome, Professor Faison. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to jump right into it. Today, we're talking about tips and strategies for improving academic writing amongst our music majors or amongst our college students. I serve as a praxis tutor and I help music majors work towards their teacher licensure. And one of the things I've noticed that has been a recurring trend and a growing trend over the past couple of years is that we are weak, or we are facing challenges with our academic writing. Some of our students are facing challenges taking the Praxis 2 exam, where it requires you to do constructive response questions at the end if you're taking the 5114 test. Some of our students are facing challenges taking the Praxis Core exam, in which they struggle with not only the math portion of the exam, but the writing portion as well. And their scores aren't quite what they want them to be. And furthermore, in general classes such as music history, orchestration, or your upper level music courses where term papers or projects or constructive responses are required, we're often facing challenges just generating quality responses in our work, and we're not making the connection about what we need to do to improve that. So I asked Professor Faison to come on and just share with us from an English professor's perspective, things that we can do as individual students, things we can do as professors to help our students, and things that we can incorporate within our departments and across departments to work together in synergy to help alleviate or resolve this issue. So Professor Faison, would you tell us just a little bit about yourself and your background?
All right. Well, I grew up in Southampton County, Virginia, graduated from Southampton High School, went on to the University of Virginia, where I pursued a bachelor's degree in English. And from there, I went on to Virginia Tech and pursued another degree, a graduate degree in English. I'm a military spouse. I married my high school sweetheart. So I have lived pretty much all across America. I've lived in both of the Carolinas. I've lived in Texas. I've lived on the north side of Chicago. I have lived overseas and taught overseas, back in Virginia. I've lived in rural states, and I've lived in Northern Virginia as well. And so I'm currently back here on the south side of Richmond. And I've been at Virginia State University teaching in the Languages and Literature Department. I'm in my fourth year now. For the last 10 to 15 years, I've been a creative writer also. I'm married and we have 3 sons. So not only have I been through the school system, not only have I been through college and university programs, but I have also put 3 Black males through K through 12 settings. Our older sons are 23 and 21, and we have a 13-year-old. And to say that I have experience with pretty much all facets of education, I have a son who is a musician. He's a percussionist, and he went to university first year and it didn't work out. And I don't know if it was because of the mental preparedness or the academic preparedness or the fact that he loved the music more than anything else. I think it's a combination of all of those. So I know the challenge of just from the music perspective, because he didn't enjoy the academic side of the music department, but he loved, the practicing part. So he did a year, and my second son is graduating from UVA next month, and then my third son is in the 7th grade. So, and then as an English instructor, if I wasn't teaching part-time, I was teaching adjunct. And I've been in that game probably for over 20 years. And I know the challenges of writing. I know I've seen students come to writing courses and they say, this is not my strong suit, or I'm not a strong writer. And a lot of times it's not that they're not strong writers, it's that they have built up this impression of what it is, and they don't like it. It's time consuming. And if you get to college and you have to play catch up in writing, of course, that doesn't feel good either. And they see it as a major undertaking. So I'm pretty familiar with, I get students, some of them come in and they're ace writers. I mean, some of them come in and they're great creative writers, but as you say, they're not as up to par on the academic writing. And there is a difference. And I think it's getting harder and harder for students to distinguish in today's climate the difference between creative writing and academic writing. Academic writing is the critical thinking, the analysis, the what we want to see on SATs, SOLs, GREs, GMATs, LSATs, things of that nature. And so I believe it's probably even more challenging. Every now and then, I'm a creative, so I throw myself right into the bunch with musicians. I'm a creative and I know what it feels like to only want to write what you want to write. I'm a poet. I've written 14 books. So I know that. And that's one of the reasons that I love poetry. We can throw songwriting right in there. One of the things, I'm teaching an African American literature course, and students have fun when we get to talk about poetry and the writers who are creative and the song lyricists, the James Weldon Johnsons up through the Kendrick Lamars, who just won a Pulitzer Prize most recently, for rap music. So we have to bridge that gap. Getting back to, I think it's more difficult for them today to get into the sync of academic writing because we're just bombarded by so much creative writing. And when today's musician students and all students look around, what they see is folk in Hollywood and in entertainment who seem to be just making it. They see the Tyler Perrys, they see, they see the rappers, they see the songwriters, they see the musicians like the India REs, and they think, oh, I can just do this. But, many of those folks, some of them have the background. And even if they don't have the formal education, they have disciplined themselves to read. I like to use Michael Jackson for an example. Michael Jackson was not formally educated, but if you ever listen to any of his interviews and his songs and his music, he took the time to educate himself.
Right.
So number one, what makes a person a better writer? I don't care whether it's creative or academic. What makes you a better writer is that you take the time to read. That's number one. If you don't make time to stop and read, it's not going to come together. And so that is really hard, getting young Black males and boys over girls to read. I struggle with it, raising 3 sons. They don't want to. And as a college professor, I've seen just in the last 5 years, males and females, they come into an English course where you are expected, most everybody would expect to have to read in an English course, and they come into my courses and they don't want to read. I interviewed someone recently and she said, we're living in the age of bullet points. Fact. Because these kids want to read the subject line, the headline. Social media is the new media, the new way that I get news. And it's just really harder when you find a kid or an individual who loves to read because they love to read, because you find someone today who's reading novels,
right?
That's awesome, because I don't know anyone in this house right now reading novels. In terms of my children, they just don't enjoy it. They've done it because they had to. But honestly, the first step is finding a love for reading. And I'm not saying you have to be a novel reader, but if you want to be better at academic writing, you have to read academic things. Like I tell my son, who's a drummer, and I have one who's interested in environmental science. If you don't want to read major things, at least go out and find scholarship. Subscribe to a magazine in your field, because in that magazine, you're going to find some scholarly types of articles. You're going to find people who've done research, even whether it's in music, whether it's in gaming, even Lego, movies, how to be a Tyler Perry, you're going to find scholarship on that. So if we could just, get our students to, subscribe, and it's so easy now to subscribe via your cell phone, your tablet.
You're right.
Just subscribe, and what you put out is 10 times, 9 times out of 10 what you take in. So you can, in order to be a better poet, I read other poets. But in order to be a better academic writer, I want to read more academic writing.
That makes a lot of sense. And I really appreciate, just the background that you have, the wealth of knowledge. And I love, just how you led into, before we can even address academic writing, one, we have to know the difference between creative writing and academic writing. And that even goes into knowing what's appropriate for even appropriate settings, what's appropriate in a text message versus what's appropriate in an email, what's appropriate as a response to a short essay question on a test, to what's appropriate as a response to an extended assignment. And then you said in order to be able to write about something, you have to have a love for reading to begin with. And I know, I struggled, my daughter growing up, she did not like reading, but now of course she's starting to have a better appreciation for it. One, because she knows the value of reading to just knowledge later on. And she has an aspiration to major in music, specifically music education. And she knows that down the road, these types of things are coming for her. So she's preparing now to say, hey, I know I have to do this, but I don't want it to feel like a chore. I want to be confident in what I'm doing. Now, when we're talking about academic writing and we're talking about students coming into college, a lot of the times us as professors, we forget that our students are coming in with some deficiencies and we're not always willing to meet them where they are and build them up. We already come in expecting them to be ready to go, and we're not taking in consideration, of course, now the trend is culturally responsive teaching, and we often associate that with implicit biases and having to do with like differences in culture and background and ethnicity. But we forget that sometimes generation bias or generation gaps can cause us to lack culturally responsive teaching and be out of touch with what today's student needs. And we have to be willing to adapt to those things. Looking at the types of students you've seen, I know you made mention of the past 5 years, but looking at COVID, looking at students that are getting ready to come into our institutions now that may have only had a few classes in English 12. They before COVID shut them down. They may not have done well with online learning. What are some things that you anticipate we're going to see that may be exacerbated or a little bit more than what we saw from students coming in with deficiencies in the past? What are some things we can expect coming into our freshman English classes that we need to be aware of? And how can we meet this head on without just throwing our students into developmental courses?
Right. So I've been dealing with that. And I think we're probably, as you say, going to be dealing with it more. The first thing, that's my teaching, that's part of my pedagogy, to meet students where they are. Typically, I think I've been doing this for years, where I do some sort of assessment. And because we've been thrown into remote learning, I haven't been diligent in doing it because we're in an online setting. In the online setting, I can offer way more in terms of links for students to be able to go and get the help for specific things that they need. So the online classroom does have some positives, but it's positive if the student uses it. What I think we will see, and I'm going to use for an example, here in the state of Virginia, just the state of Virginia, and I can speak to my state, what you may expect if you're teaching in Virginia, and if your state is similar to Virginia, is that in the state of Virginia, every student who's in the grade 12, whether it was a general class or high, level class, every student is supposed to have written a research paper. Okay, supposed to have. Okay, now even with that requirement for the state of Virginia, I get students from Virginia who fall right into my course, and it really doesn't matter what school they came from. Sometimes they still don't know how to put a research paper together, right? But there are professors who assume that. Now, I can't do that in my current setting because not everybody I'm teaching from Virginia. I get them from all over. I get them at all different levels. I get some students who barely made it out of high school, right? I get some students who need developmental in sentence writing, sentence structure, basic sentence structure, because we don't have developmental courses. I get some students who can perhaps make it through a sentence, but a paragraph is challenging. And when I say a paragraph, I'm talking about just knowing how to put one together, knowing how many lines should be in a paragraph, knowing that a paragraph is like a mini essay where it has a topic sentence and it should have some details and it should have a closing statement. Okay, we won't even get into anything else. And then you have a student who can do an essay, have students who can spit out a 5-paragraph essay, but they may not know the parts. They may not have gotten the organization, the structure, development. So one of the things that we want people to know when they leave the first level English course is what an essay looks like, what an introduction looks like. Most everybody knows what a thesis statement is, but sometimes students stumble around what to do before they get to that thesis statement. Using attention grabbers and generators and things of that nature. Then I get some students who, even in the first year, when you ask them to do an essay, they'll turn in 3 paragraphs because somewhere they've been taught that all I need is a beginning, a middle, and an end. They don't know that the middle has to be developed around points. So this is what I get. Sometimes I get students who, when I say write me an essay, they give me one long paragraph, and all wrapped up in there is everything. And then there's the individual issues, the sentence structure, not knowing how to identify your own run-on sentence, not knowing how to identify a fragment, not knowing how to properly use punctuation. We still get students who don't capitalize. Don't capitalize the first letter of a word. We get students who, when using the pronoun I, it's lowercase I. And I think this is a combination of things. I think it is so easy to miss a lesson in middle school. It's so easy to miss a concept, and writing builds and builds on concepts. But if you miss the capitalization lesson, or if you miss the sentence diagramming lesson, that just may be something. It doesn't make you not a great writer. It just makes you have to go back and relearn that or brush up on that. So as a professor, I am always looking out for, I generally ask students, have them do an assessment. First week of class, everybody just be honest about where you are. Tell me what you feel about your writing. Tell me what issues you had, when you were in high school, if you felt like you were weaker in grammar and stronger in something else, because, our students have great ideas. They have great imaginations, but if they can't get the grammar right, that can be, a damper, a hindrance for them. It can be a self-hindrance, because if I feel like I'm so afraid to show my teacher, or if I'm so afraid to show my classmates that I make these kinds of mistakes. So, I like to just, have an all-out conversation in a face-to-face setting. Say, hey, what are your weaknesses? And then all roads always lead back to me, because I've done all this for 25 years, I would consider myself kind of a writing expert at this point. But when I was a 12th grader in their shoes, I did not want to be an English major. I thought I wanted to be a doctor. I had no idea I would become an English major in college, but I did. Even in my freshman writing class, I wasn't the best writer. There were some things that I had to learn along the way. When it was time to learn how to cite sources, and even though I had written a research paper in high school, I was not 100% comfortable in college. When I got comfortable with really citing sources? In graduate school. Wow. Because I had done it for 4 years as an English major. And so when you get students who, they come to college, I don't expect them to be geniuses, but I expect them to try and expect them to show me. So I tend to give a lot of assignments where students have to try. Even if you're going to get a citation wrong, and students are usually afraid to death of plagiarism because it's a big thing in college. Most colleges have a plagiarism policy. I went to UVA where we had an honor system. Your friends could kick you out for plagiarism because the honor system is run by students. At most of the places where I teach, we have a policy. And the moment you bring up that word plagiarism, because now we have so many programs that we use, turnitin.com, Safe Assign, and students, I've seen the anxiety when you start talking about your paper's going to run through Safe Assign. So I tend to try to not, I try to ease that fear to say, number one, I know you may not get this right the first time, but if you show me that you're trying, even when you don't know how to cite, just put some parentheses there and whatever, so that I know that you know that these are not your words. And I think that's the hardest part for academic writing. That is the hardest part for a student to learn how to take scholarship, or not even scholarship, take a news article, take a song, take some lyrics, and talk about what the author did with this, because what they really want to do immediately is summarize it. They'll say, well, this is what the song says. And I'm like, no, that's not what we want. We know that you can retell a story. We know that you can tell us what the lyrics are and what the person's doing, but can you analyze it? Can you tell me how it makes you feel? Can you have an opinion? Can you tell me what maybe the writer was trying to do, what the musician was trying to do, in this piece? So getting them to go beyond. So we see so much. That's what makes teaching freshman writing sometimes overwhelming and sometimes challenging because we get people who come in on so many different levels. But I feel as an instructor, that's your job. Your job is to find out what a weakness is, because I don't want to leave you the way I found you. And I
Exactly.
don't want you to leave my class the way you came in. You have to have learned something. Otherwise, what are we doing here?
Right. And we're talking about paradigm shifts here. And I love the fact that you're constantly making references to musicians and musicianship, because we often as music majors don't make the connection as to why our GE courses or our general education courses are important to our degree program outside of, oh, I may see this again if I'm an education major trying to take the praxis, or I really don't know how to do this because I know how to write a letter. They don't make the connection between competence in English and composition and academic writing and being able to successfully analyze a music score in form and analysis class, or being able to talk about, what a composer's intention was when they composed a song. And I think that's so important. But also, I think that also brings up another good topic for the reason I'm hosting this webinar today is how can we as music professors think outside the box and really get on board with our university's QEP plans and really show that we're being synergistic and working in collaboration with our professors and colleagues in other departments to help strengthen the students that we all share. We want to make sure that when students leave our institutions, they are a holistic student and that they are well-rounded in writing, in grammar and public speaking, but also in their degree concentration. And I know I can count on my hand the number of times in undergrad I was required to write a term paper. And I can only really associate it with one, maybe two classes, which was my music history course and my marching band techniques course. Other than that, I was not required to write a paper or any type of research in a class other than, be able to analyze the score. And I think if we as professors, even as music professors, take our freshman students, look at what classes we can implement writing in. If we're doing sightseeing and ear training, okay, maybe we can incorporate maybe a writing activity so that they understand and can make a better connection with solfege. They can make a better connection with hearing the pitches. They can talk about how they feel or what challenges they feel with their perception of, maybe I'm tone deaf. We can use all of that as a teachable moment. And I think the more our students practice writing, the better they're going to become at it. Right now, in our department, the major capstone is your senior recital and followed by student teaching if you're an education major. But what about those students who may want to write a research paper? What about those students who may be looking at graduate school where the entrance requirement to get into grad school is to write a critical writing statement and we've never written a term paper before? Or the fact that we have to face, you're going the education track. Oh no, you can't do a recital in graduate school. You're required to do a thesis. And we've never written, anything past a 3 to 5 page paper at any point in our undergraduate program. Yet we're expected to produce a 20 to 75 to 100 plus page book,
Right.
and be able to be well at it. And that alone creates more anxiety on top of, that's another topic, but on top of performance anxiety we may have as music majors. Now we're talking about academic anxiety as well, because now we have to write these papers that we're not equipped to do. So
Right.
looking at what you do in your department, looking at the challenges we may face coming in after COVID with students that we're getting that may have missed almost a year of instruction in their senior English class, and then just generally those students who struggle. And I go back to what you said, you made a connection even back to middle school. It's very important that we set the foundation early. Yes, elementary school is important, but middle school, we have to keep that train going. And you mentioned missing class. Pre-COVID, if you were absent from class, you may have gotten a makeup assignment or work packet to work on, but that lesson could not be retrieved because the teacher's not going to regurgitate that lesson to you if you miss that class. I think now we're in an age, we're in a highly technical age, but also COVID has shown us that we can do learning online and that we can back up instruction and recap instruction. So I think going forward, it's going to be very important, especially on the middle school level, that if a student misses a lesson, we need to offer that opportunity to offer either a weekly recap, even if you can't do a verbatim, offer a weekly summary of what you've accomplished in that class so that we're truly leaving no one behind. And we're making the connections. But even up to the university level, I think we have to be flexible enough, even though we feel it's not our job and it's the student's responsibility to come to class. You never know in this day and age what external factors the students are facing that impact them being able to attend class. If I had to choose whether I'm keeping a roof over my head or if I'm sleeping in my car, the last thing I'm thinking about is going to class. I'm thinking about where my next meal is coming from. So we need to, I think, be a little bit more flexible and open. COVID has shown us that we can be flexible. We are truly lifelong learners. We need to practice what we preach, and we need to really meet our students and really wake up and have that paradigm shift to understand the nature and dynamic of the student that we teach and the society we're teaching in today. And we have to be willing to bend a little and be a little bit lenient to offer those caveats for our students, to be as successful, offer those, make those conditions for success. So
Right.
looking at the connection between music, and if you can relate it to other departments too, what are some things we can do or incorporate in our music classes to help support our professors? Or what are some things we can do? What resources can we gauge from the English department, or partnerships can we forge to help strengthen the students that we have, and to make better musicians and better educators when they come out of school?
I think most anybody in a writing department will tell you, we need your help. We need not be the only department on the campus that is making students write. In addition to the other liberal arts types of majors like sociology and history, we need everybody, whether it's a STEM field or a STEM major, we need everybody having students write. And there's so many different ways now. One of the things that I ask students when they come in, I love to know what their major is, because usually their major is what their passion is. If it's music, if it's criminal justice, if it's computer science, if it's engineering or fashion or whatever it is, because I'm always trying to find ways to have them incorporate that into an assignment, especially in the general English course, the 110 or for the research paper, write about something you're passionate about, write about something in your major. It could be exploring jobs. In terms of how you can bring more writing into your courses, oh my gosh, the ideas are endless. Okay. One of the old fashioned things that you do in an English course is just to have students
Mm.
journal, free write, free write. Most students, especially boys, don't like to keep journals. But what's so attractive out there right now? And we're really going to have to drop a lot of the traditional. And I'm a traditionalist. I don't make students write 10-page research papers anymore in my 111 class, because when you look at that, when they see that 10, 15 pages, it's scary and they automatically shut down. I don't want to focus on page numbers, because really, the end game is that you can show me that you can do the research, and you can really show me that in 5 to 6 pages. You really can. But if you want to be ambitious and write that longer paper, do it. But I know that's a struggle for some students. So that's one of the adjustments that I make. But getting to, in terms of what you can do in your music classes, oh my goodness, social media. I remember one semester, several semesters, I had students tweeting because it felt like students were not using social media in more of a positive way. So like, let me put a spin on that. Let me require. I did it in my African American Lit course. And of course, we're reading African American authors. So I would have them, whatever we read that week, they had to put a quote out, a profound quote from that person on Twitter. Okay. You can do that with the majors. You can have them, if you're working on whatever in music, have them choose an artist for the week. You can have them tweet, you can have them Facebook post. They love Instagram. You can, even though Instagram is about the pictures, you could have them create memes. But I think what would really be beneficial in some of your courses is to let them blog. Blogging is like, the new form of journaling. And now we have blogging. Not only do we have blogging, we have blogging, which is video blogging. They may not always want to write about it, but they may want to talk about it. If you assign a student a blog where they get to speak, maybe even bring in visuals, maybe even play their instrument, have them turn in some piece of writing about that. Students love to show you their work, especially when it's creative work.
Right.
So I think that's one way to definitely get musicians busy with writing. Tell them, create your own blog. Blogs are free out there. You can use blogger.com. Have you a banner. It can be what you want it to be, and have them maybe have to blog at least once a week. Doesn't have to be a lot. If they want to put like upload videos of playing or whatever, that gets them in, but it also gets them writing.
Yes.
And if it doesn't get them writing, the blogging gets them talking. and then, they have to set that down for you and turn in some sort of written component with that. And with the blogs and the vlogs, you can have them work on it as the semester goes on. And at the end of the semester, that's their final project. One of the things that I love is telling students, don't reinvent the wheel. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I like that. I like to have work that it builds. Whatever we do through the week, it's a learning experience. And in the end, you can put it together and you have this thing. And not only that, you can also look back. There are students who probably think they have nothing to say. Nothing to say. But if you say, I would like you, just to research a musician this week, it could be a percussionist, could be a cellist, it could be, I don't know, it could be a pianist. Go out and find somebody. Give them some people from different time periods to study. Give them people to compare. Someone from like the Harlem Renaissance to someone who's rapping or doing something now. Just come up with different things to give them, but allow them the space to be creative. So I think the blogging is perfect because you can implement concepts that you're teaching, and if you allow them to choose people that they want to learn about, number one, you're getting them to read. You're getting them to read and you're getting them to research. Video research is a thing. I listened to a lecture talk yesterday. I'm writing my dissertation right now. I listened to a lecture talk of one of the Little Rock Nines, and you best believe I was writing everything down because she spoke a lot of things that I need in my dissertation. So there's more than one way to learn how to be a researcher. Our students we have YouTube, we have multimodal, multimedia, everything. So there used to be a time when we would tell a student for research papers that you have to get it out of the library. It has to come out of a book. No more. It can come out of a video. It can come out of a documentary. It can come out of a rap song. It can come from a lot of places. One of the things we just teach is credible sources, how to find credible sources and where to get those. But once you teach that concept, they get it. But I think there's so many ways you can bring writing into your music room. I think I mentioned to you in another conversation, I was at a Furious Flower conference 2 years ago, and they brought in a professor from Virginia Tech, African-American female, and she blew our minds with this whole idea of assigning the students a mixtape. Assigning a mixtape in an English classroom, maybe everybody doesn't want their last project to be a PowerPoint. Mm-hmm. PowerPoint's kind of old for these kids, They're like, PowerPoints get boring. And if you have to do a PowerPoint in every class, give them something creative to do. I remember one time in my African-American lit course, telling students you can do anything you want for this final project. If you want to stand up here and memorize the poem, if you want to stand up here and sing Lift Every Voice and Sing by James Weldon Johnson, you can do that. So, just giving those options. But the mixtape in music, putting together a compilation of musicians that you have studied over this term, and it could be the same musicians that they've blogged about or blogged about. I looked at a friend of mine who teaches at Howard. He teaches poetry writing. And one of the things that he did, which I think I love the idea, I'm gonna probably take it and use it, but he had students reading different poets along the way, different poets. And in the end, he had them put together an anthology of those poets, their favorite poems. So you could do an audio anthology, you could do a video anthology. In terms of mixtapes and what students can do with the media now, if you just let them do it, they'll produce it. Mm-hmm. And they get really involved in it. So I think there's so many ways for you to bring writing into an academic music room.
Indeed. Now, I know in a previous conversation, we did a pre-interview and you mentioned how we could possibly have or work with our English departments on campus to have an English professor assigned to our particular departments to help guide and help create a team of teachers. We have teaching teams on the K-12 level. Why can't we have teaching teams across subject areas on the university level too? Have an English professor assigned to our department. I did another webinar, where we could have a math professor assigned to help us help our students pass these tests. But could you speak more about, the power, not just for the music department, but any department, whether it's engineering or what, having access to an English professor or partnering with an English professor to help us help our particular students. So we know that's our go-to person for our department.
Right. We don't do that at my university. but I think that's where we're headed, and I really think that's where we should go. You know, rather than to let English go and see it only as a general education type of need or requirement, I think we really should look at, you know, planting writing professors in the different departments. I know there's many, especially in engineering, many engineering departments would love to have their own professor there. You know, I've heard it for different reasons, especially departments that have a lot of ESL students who have a lot of problems with that first year English course and passing it. You know, they're doing well in engineering or well in math, but getting that language together. And so people, you know, departments and administrators and chairs, some of them would like to have their own set of instructors because that way you can be more specific. I think that's something we should look at. When I was teaching in South Korea, I had never seen anything like this. But when I was teaching in South Korea, every class of student that I taught, and I was teaching English courses, everybody in each class was in the same major. I think that's something else we ought to look at. You know, I would have a whole class full of vocalists, singers, musicians, fashion design students, engineering students, computer science. So I think that's something else that we might want to look at in terms of when we put students in an English course, can we possibly group them by major? And if you, in essence, brought in your own professor, that's what you would be doing. If you brought in, say, two, depending on how big your university is or your department, you could see how many instructors you would need. Our writing load is typically 4. Even if you didn't want to take them on full time, say, hey, we have this many students and we're going to need this many, you know, students enrolled in English 110. How many professors might you need that semester? But I think it definitely would be a plus to have a writing, you know, instructor in the department, and that way you could group your students. Because it's pretty hard when you get into a course and you want to talk about get into a major, but everybody's all spread out. We have students who are health and PE majors, uh, food nutrition majors, history majors. So then you have students who are English majors or history majors. So your class ends up being, you know, one half strong writers, another half maybe not as strong and afraid to speak up and ask questions. So I just think there's so many positives to having a writing professor or instructor within the discipline, within the department.
Indeed. And I think you were alluding to this as well, too. When you have like majors in the same class, the English professor can tailor those lessons and can pull the basic contents of English composition and English literature and make it relevant and
Right.
applicable to what it is in your major. Because again, our students are having a hard time connecting why the GE classes are important. Why do I need to pay attention to this? And then once they hear that bare minimum, you only need to have a D or this to pass, but you need to have a C in your major courses or certain classes
Right.
you must have. That's all they're going to do. They're going to focus on their major classes. But I think if we had professors, or at least we had a connection or a partnership with someone, that even if they couldn't do it full time, that we could at least reach out to them and say, hey, would you come in and do a workshop for our students on X, Y, and Z topic? We have these students at this level getting ready for praxis, getting ready for, well, whatever other literature tests you have to take in your respective states. Can you come in and do a workshop that's geared specific to this topic so that we block out the distraction of stuff that has nothing to do with our major, and things that, you know, things you may go more in depth with for your English majors may not be applicable to the music major, but there is still something to be gained by having an English professor to say, okay, we're going to talk about analyzing sampling, or we're going to talk about why this composer was important. Let's talk about how to write for music, how to write academically for music topics, and how to prepare this analysis to make sure it makes sense from beginning to end.
The other thing is this, what you get to do, and you can do this without bringing someone in, but I'm not a fan of standardized tests. Standardized tests do have their place though, not in the sense of no child left behind. So I'm not a fan of them in that way. But what we do know is that teaching through the test, it does work. You know, we don't have to be a fan of the test, but if you know you have to take X, Y, and Z tests to get into a college, you're going to do it. So what you actually set up when you bring in an instructor, or if you decide you're going to reach across another curriculum and work with the English department, bring those tests. Bring those tests, those practice tests that you're talking about, the practice that students are having a hard time passing. Lay it out, show it to the English department, and say, hey, You know, can you incorporate, you know, practice with students on how to work up to this test? Because that's what they need in order to pass the test that you're talking about. The kids need to, the first time they see that test needs not be when they go take it. You understand what I'm saying? There should be some prep every year. You can't prep for that just in senior year. I mean, you know, most forward-thinking parents who can, they want to start like prepping their kids for the SAT like as freshmen. You know, you take the PSAT in the 8th grade. So it's the same with your music test and the teaching test. You know, don't just put it before them when it's time to graduate. That needs to be in the curriculum. You know, give them samples of what this is what you're going to have to write if you're thinking about going into to teachers. And why not just put it right on into some of the assignments, you know, weave it right on into the music class, into the English class. And when you can bring in a partnership like that, you can do that. Because first of all, your music department is full of people who had to go down the same road.
Right.
You know, they can tell you what taking that test was about. They can talk to you about what they wrote about, what their challenges and what their fears were. And, you know, they can relay that to the student. But the best thing is to get, you know, teach to the test. Teach to the test.
Indeed, I agree. And then incorporating those questions, a lot of the time, especially on the praxis, I know that the clients I work with now, a lot of the issue is being able to simply understand what the question is saying. And these are techniques that are taught, you know, in English class, you know, even learning how to understand word problems in math, you're taught to synthesize what a question is asking you in an English class. And I think having access to that practice test, you know, knowing what's on the test, English professors can help students understand, okay, these types of questions are asking you to think in this manner. This is what, you know, these questions mean. This is what these buzzwords mean when you see at least, not, except, either, or. This is what this means and how to approach this type of question. But you also mentioned, you know, it is important for our professors, you know, to know what's on the test as well, even in our music department. And that's a topic that I'll be addressing in a webinar coming up next week. But it is very important, you know, early preparation, early communication, constant communication is good. And the more you infuse the elements of the exams in all of your classes, the better prepared our students are going to be. But it's also up to us as professors to know what's on the test, which means we need to go take the test. We need to know what's on the test in order to make sure our students are better equipped to face this test. We cannot send someone out there blind and we don't know what to expect. We're just throwing them out to the wolves if we have not seen this test for ourselves, if we have not sat down, taken a practice test, synthesize our results to see if we can pass the test, and then take the challenges we had or take what we've observed on the test and take it back into our classrooms and build upon that, and then reach across departments and say, hey, this is what I've noticed on this exam. This is what I anticipate my students will have an issue with, or this is what I know to be true that my students have been struggling with. What strategies do you have? What resources or what materials and techniques do you have that can assist my students with doing better the next time around, or assist the students who are preparing for this test do better the first time out the gate? Because we have students who are paying almost mortgages to pass these certification tests, and then that compounded with challenges with academic writing, that deters them from the field, it deters them from the profession, and it makes their matriculation through the university that much more difficult. And when they do graduate, those that do graduate still with some level of uncertainty about their preparedness for the career force, or they graduate with resentment because of what they feel they received or the lack thereof.
Let me tell you why I'm another fan of having major specific instructors. This is why, you know, higher ed is a lot different than K-12. In K-12, no matter what grade level you're teaching on, if you're in that school, you're all teaching the same thing. You're using the same textbook. Once a student gets to college, we have such thing, you know, called academic freedom. So we teach the way we want. Most professors teach the way they were taught, or they've adopted their own pedagogy and style. Some of us don't even use the same textbooks. Some of us aren't even using the same, you know, we have probably a good 20, 25 professors in our department. You could take 10 of us and never get the same experience. You see where I'm going? You could take 10 of us. I get students all the time who say, well, we didn't do this in 110. Because you had a different instructor, and I can't be in control of what's going on over there. You know, where I may be writing intensive, there are instructors who aren't writing intensive. So I think that's another advantage to linking up and getting your own professors, because then you know that every music student is getting the same instruction when it comes to writing. But when you take your students and you disperse them out to the department, and if you have a department where everybody's kind of teaching what they want and how they want, and you might have, you may have a very small percentage of music students who even get the same thing. And if what you need them to get is how to be able to pass this type of test, then you really need professors who are teaching how to pass that type of test. Because I mean, it's a big risk. It's hit or miss with English instructors. And students usually take instructors who were recommended to them. Because I get that. We get that. I've gotten that on every college I've been. People recommend me. It can be challenging, but I also want to make sure you get it. I'm one of a few people who probably teach students and make them cite sources in the first level course. Many people don't even make the students try to cite sources. They just let them free write. But I mean, if you're going to have to get to 111 and write a whole research paper, you don't want to first start doing that in 111,
Right.
and trying to do it in 12 and 16 weeks. So I just think, there's just so many reasons why you need to look at as a program, pulling in a select group of instructors to be the writing instructors for your students. Because at the end of the day, you need them to pass those tests. And for all the reasons that you just said, you don't want somebody to go through 4 years of college and then just because they can't pass a test, totally give up on that. I mean, and it happens. It happens a lot.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. We've talked about a lot today. We've talked about things that we can expect because of COVID with students coming into our institutions next year as incoming freshmen or as transfers. We've talked about things we can do within our classes to get our students to write more and to understand the difference between academic and creative writing. We talked about, as it relates to the music department, things that we can do to incorporate writing into our classes, into our music classes, and kind of motivate our students and present students with opportunities to write more across the board. And then we also talked about reaching across the aisle and working with other professors, to help strengthen and create a team of support for our students going through the program. As we get ready to wrap up today, are there any specific things you'd like to share for our students? Because we've talked a lot about what we can do as professors and what we can do as university supports, but in essence, we also want to have that self-accountability, and we want our students to grow from dependent learners to independent learners and independent thinking. And so what are some tips or some final thoughts that you can leave with our students who may see this that they can do? What steps can they take, or what strategies can they implement to better themselves as far as academic writing, in addition to what you mentioned at the beginning of the call about reading more?
Mhm. Some advice that I would give students today is, number one, I know that we are all immersed in technology. No one more so than me, because I'm glued to my cell phone. But our cell phones are mini computers today, and we need to be able to make them work for us. I tell this to my own kids. My 13-year-old has a phone, and I'm like, this phone is number one, is so we can reach you. But number two, I want you to start using this phone to enhance and increase yourself. So if there's anything I could tell young people is, can we just not just use our technology for social good, for keeping in contact with family and friends and texting people and using texting lingo, subscribe to some newspapers and some journals in your field. When you're out there, dedicate yourself to reading at least 15 minutes, even if it's on your phone, something academic. Not just, because when we're just reading text messages and emails and, people are just chopping things up, whatever we take in is whatever we're putting out. And help yourself in the long run, engage. If you go on Facebook and all these groups now, almost every organization has a social media presence. Every single organization. I don't care if it's the Tony Awards, whether it's Broadway, whether it's Carnegie Hall,
Mm-hmm.
it has its own social media presence. So for, whatever you're a music major, go in and link to all these sites, because just by, you will get just a drop off. Just by being a member, just by liking a page, you will start to get events and news from Carnegie Hall, Broadway, just whatever. You'll get that. You'll get news. Artists have their own individual pages, and artists share professional things. They share professional events. It's not just the reading that will enhance you; it's the events. I find myself in this remote Zoom world. So many things are going on that I can be a part of now, and I can't even do it all. Even right now, while doing this interview with you, I'm missing a reading that I want to be in on, but hopefully they're going to record it. So, I mean, there's just so much. Don't waste your time for idleness. You know, my husband and I say all the time that we wish we had the internet when we were coming through. Yes. I mean, you could literally make yourself a genius right now. And I'm not even talking about formal education. If you would just tap into the right things, social media wise, technology wise, you could give yourself the best education ever. And just to speak to those sites that we talked about, music professors, make the students go and like and join these testing sites. I'm sure the music practice has a Facebook page, a Twitter account, an Instagram, all of that. Because some of those testing strategies will be coming out on those social media pages. I have found that, you know, because I help students with college, SAT, GRE prep. If you like those social media pages, they will give you strategies on how to pass the test. So, you know, there's just so many ways to use technology, and I implore the students to, you know, we're glued to this phone anyway all day. Let it be for good. Let in the time that you're reading text and communicating with family and friends, let there be some professional and some creative and some academic and some scholarly things falling upon us every day. That's what I do. I subscribe to almost everything because I want to be in the know. And especially in my field right now, I'm such a poet fanatic that I want to know everybody out there who's reading. Everybody.
Indeed.
So that's what I recommend.
Yes, well, thank you. Some sound advice. We've definitely hit a lot of key points today as it relates to improving academic writing, just getting our students and our professors to think differently about academic writing and think outside the box. I'm sure we've all been doing some great things, but hopefully today's message will give us some new strategies that we can try to help strengthen the writing of our students, strengthen the comprehension level of our students in our classes, and to make for better results, not just for these certification exams, but for capstone projects, term papers, and things in our regular core classes throughout the year. I anticipate that hopefully the strategies gained in today's webinar will help strengthen student responses in music history courses, in theory assignments, and just in how they approach preparing their notes for their senior recitals and things like that, and for entrance into graduate school. So for those of you watching today, I would like to thank you for joining in. For those of you who are going to watch the recording later, I hope that you've gained some valuable knowledge from this webinar entitled QEP, Improving Academic Writing for Our Music Majors. And again, although this was geared towards music majors, it can generalize to just about any major at any college and university. So I hope that you would like and share this on all of your pages on social media. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Prodigious Music Concepts, and be sure to subscribe to my channel on YouTube, PMC Professional Development Webinars, where you can find a recording of this later, as well as other notable webinars and other presentations. Again, I would like to say thank you to Professor Latorial Faison for taking time out of your schedule today to just chat with me and to share your knowledge with the world. For those of you who are listening, please stay tuned. Yeah, I see Mr. Holden and Mr. Taylor Whitehead are on the call as well. Stay tuned next week, next Thursday, April the 15th, 2021 at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm hosting a webinar entitled Staying Relevant, Connecting the HBCU Music Curriculum to Today's Culture. We're going to talk about culturally responsive teaching. We're going to talk about our curriculum. We're going to talk about preparing today's student and helping more of our students make it from enrollment to graduation graduation, helping them successfully matriculate through our programs, thinking through a new lens. So once again, thank you so much for your time. If there are any questions, I would like to take maybe 2 or 3 minutes and answer any questions anyone may have. You can feel free to put it in the chat. If you're joining us on Facebook, put it in the chat. If you're joining us here on Zoom, feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat. But I would like to open the floor for questions for about 2 or 3 minutes of questions, if there are any.
Hey, well, I like to say this is good. I see the a similarity with the music, and you talk about the middle school and making sure that the kids are knowing the elements, the essential elements in the middle school, because quite often when we receive kids in our band class, we know that things are lacking in the middle school. You know, what is the eighth note? What is a quarter note? What is the half note? So we see the similarity in writing skills, you know. So there's, I mean, this is good. So now it opened another door for me to see where the problems occurred. But of course, now I'm from the old school, and I love going to the library to read.
Mhm.
But everything now is so instant.
Mhm.
You know, you can get it right now instead of, you know, kids going to the library, going to sit down and reading the book, and you can get it right now. So I think that might be one of the problems, even with the YouTube for music.
Mhm.
You know, a lot of time we like for students to go ahead and work out the problems on their solo material. Don't go to YouTube to listen to it. Work it out yourself. Then go to YouTube for the stylistic part of it. You
Mhm.
know, so this is good. This is good. Thank you so much. And I'm going to take this back to my students to let them know what's happening in the world today in writing and in music. Thank you
Mhm.
so much.
Indeed,
It's
thank you.
great.
You brought up something really good that I'm gonna bring up next week too, is just not using YouTube, you know, to learn your parts. I had that situation happen in my class yesterday morning, to be exact. A student listened to someone else's recording, and instead of them learning to read it and play it for themselves, they played from the recording and missed the entire last 2 lines of the song. So, you know, definitely, you know, understanding that while we're in a microwave age or a highly technical age, we have to use it for good and use it for the right reasons. So
Mhm.
Professor Faison, you wanted to say something?
No, I was gonna say to Mr. Holden that at BSU, you know, our students have access to like an amazing library database. And
Mhm.
we have personnel in that library, they'll do videos, but I find myself every semester doing a recorded lecture, especially remotely, just in showing students how to walk through there. And that may be something that you could do in the music department. Walk them through pulling up these music sources in the database. And
Mhm.
that's one of the pluses of what we're doing right now, Zoom. You can literally record a whole lecture or
Mhm.
just a segment where you show them how to go in there and find the music sources, because there's so many different databases. And I love it because you also that database will cite the sources for them, so
That's
it
right.
takes that piece out of it. And a lot of students don't know that. And I'm like, just click right here and you found the source and you've cited it and it's done and you can move on. You don't have to agonize. So, but there's so many databases, and I tell them access to a database, that stuff is expensive. You can't afford that when you're not a student. So
Right.
while you are a student, take advantage of this database.
Mhm.
Exactly. But yes, thank you so much for that. And it's great to see, there's so many connections, with music and English and music in any of the core subject areas. So I really like, the analogy and just the similarities that Mr. Holden shared as well. So again, thank you all just for taking time out of your schedule. I wanted to make sure we did this as like a lunch and learn or a lunch and go. So I did not want to have this be an extensive webinar, but just get to the meat and potatoes of what we need to do to help our students become better students and better musicians and music educators in the future, and help to improve, just the quality of their experience while they're at our institutions. So again, thank you, Professor Faison. Thank you to all of you who join us through Zoom and through Facebook. I truly appreciate you. And stay tuned for just future events and just future things that are coming from Prodigious Music Concepts and from future collaborations with Professor Faison, Professor Holden, and others in the industry. So again, thank you so much. And I wish you all a very, very, very happy weekend. Stay safe, and I will see you next time.
Okay.
Same to you.
All
Have a
right.
good weekend.
You
Okay.
too.